started. Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. Welcome to our webinar Wednesday. My name is Caption.Ed and I am an assistive technology and additional support needs teacher here at Call Scotland. Delighted to be joined this afternoon by Adam Newson of CareScribe. Hi Adam. So Adam is an assistive technology consultant at CareScribe and his focus is new client partnerships. He takes part in industry events, leading informative webinars like today and delivering one-to-one demos for both Caption.Ed and TalkType. Today's session is being recorded thanks to my colleague Robert in the background, and the recording link will follow today's webinar by email for those that are not able to join us live. I know that we've got quite a lot of folks signed up from all over the globe, and sometimes time is the barrier to joining us live there. So if you are joining us live, please ensure that your mics remain switched off throughout. And if you don't want to be in the recording, then it's just about making sure that your camera stays off for now. If you wish to have live captions displayed throughout the webinar today, please go into language and speech settings and turn them on, and you'll be able to have closed captions on our YouTube recording as well. The webinar is going to run for approximately 20 minutes today, and then you'll have the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. If you do have any while Adam's presenting, please feel free to pop them into the chat pane and then we can facilitate that at the end. So I'll pass over to Adam. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks so much, Kirsty. Really appreciate it. And thanks a lot for obviously having us along. For any of you that are familiar with me and the name Adam Newson, you'll be well aware that I'm essentially the education specialist here at CareScribe. So yeah, any support that I can provide, whether it's to do with Captioned or to do with TalkType, I know that Kirsty's going to go ahead and share my contact information, so feel free to get in touch with me directly. But anyway, I think it's time for us to get started. So first of all, it's just worth me kind of introducing CareScribe for those of you that aren't familiar with us. So we essentially are the assistive tech provider for two softwares. So the first one being Captioned, which we're going to talk about today, and then the second one being TalkType, which is the most accurate dictation software that's out there. Obviously, we're not covering the TalkType side of things, but again, if anybody would like information on that, I'd be more than happy to get a one-to-one scheduled. So feel free to get in touch with me. So something that's kind of worth me mentioning, and it's almost overarching over both of our tools, is the fact that ultimately they're extremely accurate. And I think for anyone that's in this session at the moment, you'll all agree for any speech to text software, the three most important things to think of is around accuracy. You know, is what I'm saying exactly what's going to be recorded? Because ultimately that can then give students confidence that they can either dictate or they can comprehend in the most reliable way, essentially. We've done a number of studies that have put us up against some of the most prolific tools that has essentially demonstrated that our word error rate is significantly better than the likes of Microsoft, AWS, and also OpenAI. Something else that's really worth me mentioning is the fact that both of our tools handle accents extremely well. I'll give you a bit of an example. My grandfather is Welsh by nationality. His first language is actually Welsh. So you can imagine just how thick his Welsh accent is. And it's quite funny because in his kitchen, there'll be a little Echo Dot, an Amazon Alexa, essentially, that he tries to use as his cooking timer. He'll have to stand so close to it, really sort of overpronounce and borderline shout until eventually he gives up and just makes me set one on my phone. Now, one of the first things that I did after starting here at CareScribe was got him to jump into a caption session with me, and he was blown away by the fact that he could literally speak at the speed that I am right now, and it would record everything that he'd said exactly as he had said it. So just gives you a bit of a flavour. Now, it is also worth me mentioning that under the hood, both Captioned and TalkType, it's the same speech to text software. So both of our tools are just as accurate as each other. The other thing that's worth me mentioning is the fact that we're cross-platform. So whether it's Windows, Mac, Chromebook, even a mobile device, I've got one here at the moment. Now I'm able to go ahead and use either of our two tools via that mobile device as well. Reality is we can all agree almost being in 2026 means that assistive tech should work on any device. And actually, if a student starts off with, let's say, a Mac and then ends up on a Windows, the only thing that they should be thinking is, do I prefer that device rather than is my assistive tech compatible with it, essentially. So that's kind of the overarching stuff. Obviously, what we're here to talk about is why is Captioned the best captioning software and also a tool for students to make notes that's out there at the moment. And I think to kind of introduce you properly, the first thing that I'll do is put plainly what this tool does. Now, Captioned is designed to support the comprehension and retention of info for a student during their studies. And it does so by, you've guessed it, providing super accurate captioning and a space for them to make their notes seamlessly. And it's ultimately at that point that a student can start to consider their caption library as being that one central location for all of their studies. And that's because they're actually able to get a recording going regardless of the format. So whether it's an in-person lesson or lecture, perhaps they've got an online lesson or lecture, maybe they've came across a YouTube video or even sourced an MP3 or an MP4 file. It genuinely doesn't matter. They're able to get a space for their captioning and then also an area for them to make their notes, which we can all agree can speed up retention quite a lot for students. So a couple of bullet points here that I think do two things. First of all, these is essentially what separates us from other captioning tools that's out there. So not only do we sort of provide that super good quality accuracy and the fact that we're cross-platform, but there's also a couple of additional things that other captioning tools generally don't have. So first of all, we offer editable transcripts, which can be really beneficial for a lot of students. Secondly to that, classic misspelling from myself, we actually also offer speaker labeling. And reality is speaker labeling is really important for students because it may well be a couple of months from the time that they've recorded that lesson to the time that they go to revisit it. And what they're going to want is the additional context in terms of what the lecturer said, what they said, and what their friend said, because the lecturer's information is obviously going to be more reliable. Now, one of the other things that our tool offers is a number of different formats. So we bring together the video element, the audio element. There's even an option for students to upload slides and spider diagrams, those sorts of things. So the tool is really designed to enable a student to learn in whichever way they feel they can retain information the best. And actually what we've found is that ultimately what Caption does for a lot of people is it reduces anxiety, and that reduction in anxiety results in better educational outcomes. Now, with that in mind, I would just like to quickly jump onto a bit of a testimonial from a student. So this is about Grace. She is a student at the Uni of Bristol, so back where I'm supposed to be at the moment. And ultimately, when she came to us, she explained that being in her lesson, she was really stressed because she was trying to make her notes at the same time as actually trying to listen to that lesson and lecture. And she found it really, really difficult to do both simultaneously and felt as if that lesson was kind of moving away from her in terms of speed. But being given Captioned, she had the confidence that she could sit back in her lesson, she could truly listen to what the lecturer is saying, and then have confidence that when she goes to revisit that recording, it's almost there in the complete lesson experience, so in its entirety, for her to then go and make her notes. So that's Grace. Now, the next thing for me to kind of go into are the two different versions of Caption that we actually offer. So first of all, you've got Caption Pro, which provides us with live captioning. Now, generally that's provided for students that have hearing loss or are deaf, because they obviously want to track along with every single word that's being said. However, we do also offer a second version of Captioned, which is called Caption Notes. Now, for students in England, Caption Notes is provided to neurodivergent students. I am aware in Scotland there isn't the same sort of restriction in place. However, generally that's what I've found a lot of students kind of prefer in that sense. And you're probably wondering what is the difference between the two, right? Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, Caption Pro provides that live captioning. So it's in the moment, every single word. Whereas with Caption Notes, there is about a 15 to 20-second delay between what's said and when those words are actually released. So the words almost come up, And it's essentially as if they've been highlighted with sort of a black highlighted bar. And after 20 seconds, it's released and then looks identical to what you would see with Caption Pro. I'm not a person that likes to do death by PowerPoint, so I think really it's just time to move into the tool itself. So this here is captioned. Now, you'll notice that I'm currently on the home page, and to get a recording going, all that I would need to do, click on recording just here, or record, I should say. It's at this stage that I can decide what type of recording I would like. So this is what we offer for the in-person lessons and lectures. However, we do also offer that meeting link. But considering we're in a webinar at the moment, I will go ahead and just get a recording started. So I'll click on start recording. Now what you're going to notice is this is going to provide us with super accurate captioning. You all probably would have picked up that I naturally speak quite quickly, but what I'm going to do for you now is I'm going to speak even quicker to truly demonstrate the fact that I don't consciously need to think about this tool actually captioning me. Now that is really, really important for students because we've personally found from feedback, a lot of students aren't willing to raise their hand and say, sorry, lecturer, can you slow down? Can you speak up? My captioning tool needs to keep up with you. So that's the accuracy side. Now, I think it's quite important to dive into those two different use cases. So first of all, we've got individuals that have hearing loss. Now, funny enough, I actually have hearing loss myself. And before starting here, I never really recognized how much lip reading and making my own assumptions to fill in the blanks I was truly doing. And we can all agree that for students, that's actually something that's quite dangerous. You know, students should have confidence that what they're trying to comprehend is exactly what was said during that lesson, because ultimately it's their feet that are going to get hold to the coals during an exam if they've retained information that wasn't actually accurate. So that's use case number one. Now, use case number two are individuals that have the likes of ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, just to name a few diagnoses for you. And reality is we're all human. You know, I can guarantee that, you know, in 2025, every single one of us has had an instance where we've been in a meeting or something like that. We've looked out the window and thought, oh, I'm actually really hungry. What's for dinner this evening? Did I feed the dog earlier? Is the stove still on? And we found that the problem for a lot of students is if they feel as if they've missed out on maybe 5 minutes worth of context, they feel like the rest of that lesson's actually totally lost to them. But the great thing about our tool is the fact that when they do refocus, they can go ahead, scroll up on the conversation history, fill in those blanks, and then they're straight back in the room with everybody else, which is really important. I know that when it comes to note taking, there are other captioning softwares out there that treat the tool more like Netflix. So with other captioning softwares, you may see potentially sort of 3 sentences that will come up. Those 3 sentences are then replaced by the next 3. Now, the downside with that is a student then isn't able to actually look at the full transcript until after the recording. So they're not able to bring themselves straight back into the room. But anyway, that's enough on the 2 use cases. Let's show you a bit of the functionality. So you'll notice that I can actually upload a PDF slideshow. So I can go ahead and attach that from my PC. And then what I'm able to do is click along those slides as I'm listening to that lesson and lecture in real time. Additionally to that, we currently offer the mark as important button and then also copy to notes. Now you'll notice that both of these things and the note-taking section itself is actually time-stamped. And this is good for 2 reasons. So first of all, when I'm in a lesson itself, I can go ahead and click on that timestamp and that will bring me straight up to that section of transcription. However, in my opinion, the best thing about this is the fact that when I save this recording and I go to revise after the fact, everything is linked. So the audio will link to that one moment in time. Obviously, then the transcript will link, and then also the notes that I've made on the right-hand side. Moving up into the onto the note-taking section. So you'll notice that we've got some formatting options, and then there's even a choice for a student to attach files. A good example for this would be spider diagrams, mind maps, those sorts of bits. I was actually doing a training session with a student the other day that has dyslexia, and they explained to me that when they're given a very large bit of text and there aren't additional prompts, they find it quite hard to genuinely retain that information. But having the option to upload things like spider diagrams essentially just allows them to have that info sink in a little bit better. So again, what we've tried to do with this tool is we've tried to make it customizable to the user so that they can learn in the way that they feel is best for them. Now, up in the top right corner, the preferences. You'll see that I've got sepia mode on. Now that supports dyslexic individuals, but we do also offer light mode and dark mode as well. The next button is the workspace. And what this does is it lets me customize what I'm looking at. So if in this instance, I'm sat at the front of a lesson and I can hear quite well, I can go ahead and turn off that transcript and just look at my notes and also those slides. Similarly, maybe I don't want to look at my notes right now. So I can go ahead and toggle that off and solely look at that slideshow. So again, this page is fully customizable, but it's worth me mentioning, even though we weren't looking at the slides, the transcription, everything is still being tracked in that sense. Now, the next thing is the share function. And the share function during a live lesson is offered to our Caption Pro users, so the live captioning users. But that share function is still suitable for notes users after that recording is finished. So rather than kind of showing you it during a live lesson, what I'm going to do is end the recording, click End and Add to Library, and then I'll show you what that sort of share link will look like after the audio is processed. Now, it will take a few moments for that audio to obviously process. I'm in a hotel room at the moment, so fingers crossed my Wi-Fi is good enough for it to kick in quite quickly. But while we wait, it's also worth me mentioning that it's at this stage, generally, that someone can customize that speaker label. So obviously, in this instance, it's all been me talking. Therefore, we can only actually see speaker one. However, if I'd started this recording previously, it would have heard Kirstine's voice, and then it would basically separate out what Kirstine said and what I had said to be speaker one and speaker two. But as you can see, what I can now do is I can actually come in and I can assign this to the lecturer to give myself that prompt a little bit later on. Now that I've talked about the speaker labeling, it's given the audio enough time to process. So I'm going to click on play, and what you'll notice is that everything should be tracked, so long as my speakers are loud enough. I can also jump around the page if I would like.
Adam, is there meant to be sound there? Were you meant to be sharing with sound?
Aha, there was no sound on that side. Okay, let me quickly just reshare this.
Yep.
Sorry about that, everyone. We'll try again. For a tech person, I have to confess I'm not very techy. I consciously need to think about this tool actually captioning me. Now, that is really, really important. I'm assuming that you could hear that okay that time,
Yeah,
Kirsty?
yeah, that's fine. Yep, good.
No problem. Thank you. Yes, so like I just said, everything is essentially tracked. Someone is able to jump around that page. And as I mentioned during those slides, I'm also actually able to come in and amend some of that transcription if I would like. Now, being able to amend transcription is really important for a lot of people because sometimes perhaps there's a spelling mistake. An example of that might be someone's name, like Siobhan. And if I was a student that had to come into this quite regularly to revise, I would find that really, really frustrating. Now, I know I mentioned previously that everything is time-stamped, but again, as I make a note, you'll notice this is now 19 seconds in, which is exactly where I am within the recording itself. And for those online meetings, there would also be a video element up in the top left corner. So, two things here for me to show you. First of all, that share function. After I enable that share link, I can then paste that across to one of my friends. Perhaps we're doing a little bit of group work, for example. And all that friend would need to do is pop in an email address, agree those terms and conditions, and then what you'll see is that they actually have access to that very same recording. The only difference being they don't have access to the note-taking section or those slides, mainly because we didn't want them to go deleting slides or deleting notes from the account holder themselves. So that's the share function that we offer. Now, the next thing for me to dive into is around AI summaries. And it's something that we implemented not too long ago, but I know within education, AI is a bit of a buzzword. Some people are quite concerned about implementing AI into studies, whereas other people recognize that it is a tool that can be utilized for students quite effectively. And in my opinion, the integration that we've made between AI and Captioned, it certainly helps rather than hinders a student during their studies. Now, comedically, because this was only a 5 minute recording, we've only actually got the one chapter. However, if you use your imagination on this, for an hour-long lesson, there's going to be numerous chapters, roughly about sort of 10 chapters that could be there potentially. And that's good for students twofold. So first of all, it enables a student to actually interrogate the information that's here. So we could go, hang on a second, was Adam really talking for 5 minutes just to cover this one chapter? We could then go back into our recording, look at what was said, and then come to that same conclusion ourselves. However, in my opinion, the best way that someone can use AI is actually within the library itself. So I've just opened up my library, and let's say that I've got an exam that's to do with AI, for example. I could go ahead and search AI in that search bar. This would then bring up every recording that I have renamed that associates to AI. And then what I could do is I could open up one of those summaries. I could look at what was actually covered at a very high level overview of it. I can then establish if I feel this is information that might come up during one of my exams. And if it is, I can then revisit that lesson in its entirety. I know I'm peeling my memory back here. When I did my studies a good decade ago, it was a logistical nightmare to revise. Main reason being, I spent more time trying to find the information than actually trying to retain the information. And what the AI summaries that we provide does for a lot of students is it essentially enables them to find that information a lot quicker and organize their day a lot more effectively, essentially. So that's the AI side of things. Few additional points that's worth me mentioning. We do offer a custom dictionary. So this is great with last names, abbreviations, uncommon business names, those sorts of things. And on top of that as well, within the account, someone is also able to customize their account, essentially. One of the big things here is the fact that we offer 55 different transcription languages, including Irish and also Welsh. Now, you may be wondering around this sort of Google Calendar integration that we offer, and this is pretty much the newest feature to do with Captioned. So what someone is now able to do is they're able to go ahead and either link their Google Calendar or their Microsoft Calendar. And how that kind of looks afterwards is what you see here on my homepage. So what this then does is it gives me a prompt to actually start that recording for that specific meeting. We found from a lot of students that actually they'd start a lesson, forget to turn on their Captioned, and then they might miss the first 10 minutes within that recording itself. So having that additional prompt can really just get students into the swing of things and into the swing of using Captioned. Now, that's essentially everything that I've got to cover. I know that was a very sort of high level, quite quick walkthrough of the tool itself, but I was keen to leave some time for questions. I don't know if there are any in the chat, Kirstine.
Not as yet, but I'll just give folk a minute or two to process what you were talking about there, and
Of
please
course.
put in any questions into the chat for Adam. I've got a question, first of all, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Um, so when you are playing back, um, is there a choice of voices? Are there,
No, so when you
no,
actually play back the recording, what it's
mm-hmm.
doing is it's solely playing back the audio itself. So if I
Playing the
was
audio. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So if I was to pull up the session that we've just done, you'll notice that this is quite literally just my voice that's over the top. It's not an automated
No.
voice that
Okay.
people can customize. Yeah, so as I click on
So they're
play,
hearing it back.
yeah, that's exactly correct.
So if they were using it in class, presumably they would, yeah, well, it's interesting because somebody's actually just asked that question as well about lecturers being okay with being recorded, and do you know if it's being used in schools?
That's a really interesting question.
That's kind of where I was going.
Yeah, obviously, two minds thinking quite alike there. Yes, it's definitely a really interesting question. From a university perspective, generally lectures are quite happy to be recorded. Main reason being a lot of those lessons and lectures can usually be uploaded into online portals and those sorts
Hmm.
of things. I do know that within school settings, we have a number of users that do use the tool within schools, but it's obviously something that they would have to discuss with the teacher.
Sure.
It is worth me mentioning that within schools, obviously classrooms can be a bit louder than lecture theatres. So
Hmm.
with that in mind, for students that have hearing loss, for example, generally they can also be provided with a listening device, such as like a
Yep.
phonak device, for example. And our tools work really, really well with those things. So it can then increase the accuracy even further if needs be.
Right.
I hope that kind of helps.
Okay. Somebody's saying, looks like a great tool. How do we get it? And costing.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So
Pop
when
your
it comes
contact details in.
yes. So first of all, I would definitely recommend reaching out to me directly, and we can kind of discuss things in more detail, and I can get you set up with a free trial. Now, when it comes to the costing side of things, it really depends on the avenue. So I know that we do offer pricing via our website. However, for a lot of people, they're able to be provided with these tools through the DSA. But certainly, one of the things that I can share with you, if you would like, Kirstine, is just a link to our pricing page so that you can share that with people as well if needs be.
Sure. Yep.
Fantastic.
What else? If someone can hear but has difficulty processing the language, would the Caption Pro be suitable for everyday situations, would you say?
Yeah, that's definitely a really interesting use case. And I think, to be honest, it just depends on the individual themselves. I know that when I've tried learning different languages, it can sometimes be a lot easier to read it rather than to actually hear it, because as you said, you can process the words a lot better. Generally, in that instance, I would say that notes could potentially be quite suitable. As there's only a sort of 15 to 20-second delay, I think that it could kind of be applicable when it comes to trying to comprehend everything that was said. But again,
Hmm.
it just depends on the use case of that particular individual, essentially.
Yeah. And I think you've actually already answered the other question somebody was asking about competing noise. So, maybe the speaker wearing that microphone or the person having the specific device.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that's worth me mentioning is one of the reasons why our tool is so accurate is because what it does in the back end is it tries to reduce ambient noise quite a lot.
Yeah.
So those studies that I referred to, what we did was we put the tool into a busy call center, into a train station, those sorts of places. And it essentially tries to hone in on the most prominent voice, which is ultimately the person that's actually speaking. And then a
Hmm.
lot of that background noise is kind of negated in that sense.
Great. Questions are coming thick and fast here for you, Adam. If there are a few people in the room who would benefit, can the lecturer or teacher use it and put the live captions on the big screen and the whiteboard in front of the class so that deaf students can lip read and read the text?
Yeah, I don't see exactly why not. And I guess one of the other things that people can do is if all of those students have a laptop or a PC, they can actually use that share link and they can use that share link during a live recording, and then everyone's got the captioning right in front of them as well.
Right, that's great. I think you will have a few emails in your inbox following up from that by the signs of things.
Oh, amazing. Brilliant.
Great. Well, listen, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon, Adam. That's been great. I know we were impressed when we all saw it as a team, so thank you.
No, thanks.
And thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. We will be back next week with Kirsten Gottschalk from Toby Dynavox. She's looking at AAC and integrating that in Play. So that'll be another interesting webinar. So have a good evening, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.